The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Peter approached Jesus and asked him, "Lord, if my brother sins against me, how often must I forgive him? As many as 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I say to you, not 7 times, but 77 times. That is why the kingdom of heaven must be likened to a king who decided to settle accounts with his servants. When he began the accounting, a debtor was brought before him who owed him a huge amount. Since he had no way of paying it back, his master ordered him to be sold, along with his wife, his children, and all his property, in payment of the debt. At that, the servant fell down, did homage, and said, 'Be patient with me, and I will pay you back in full.' Moved with compassion, the master of that servant let him go and forgave him the loan. When that servant had left, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him a much smaller amount. He seized him and started to choke him, demanding, 'Pay back what you owe.' Falling to his knees, his fellow servant begged him, 'Be patient with me, I will pay you back.' But he refused. Instead, he had the fellow servant put in prison until he paid back the debt. Now when his fellow servants saw what had happened, they were deeply disturbed, and went to their master and reported the whole affair. His master summoned him and said to him, 'You wicked servant, I forgave you your entire debt because you begged me to. Should you not have had pity on your fellow servant as I had pity on you?' Then in anger his master handed him over to the torturers until he should pay back the whole debt. So will my heavenly Father do to you, unless each of you forgives his brother from his heart." When Jesus finished these words, he left Galilee and went to the district of Judea across the Jordan. The Gospel of the Lord. Today's readings are about forgiveness. And it's not just us being forgiven, but it's us forgiving others. And not once, but over and over and over and over again, just as we are forgiven by God. Now, that first reading from Joshua, I love the imagery. Joshua's getting ready to cross the Jordan River with a nation. Moses has died. Moses' authority has been given to Joshua. God speaks to Joshua the way he spoke to Moses and tells him, with a priest, bring the Ark of the Covenant first. When it hits the Jordan River, the river will dry up. And so Joshua follows the command. Not only does it dry up, it's not like a little space as wide as this church. It's 14 miles upstream and 7 miles downstream all the way to the Dead Sea. And it needs to be wide because he's got like 1 million people with him. And they're going to cross over into the promised land. And the reason they're able to make it there is because God has forgiven them over and over and over for all the transgressions they did against God during their journey of 40 years across the desert and wandering around in the desert. And that story is very symbolic for us because the promised land for us is heaven. The waters that we cross are the waters of baptism. Because of baptism, we're able to enter into heaven. And the many sins that we have committed during our lifetimes have been forgiven by God so that we can indeed enter heaven if we learn to forgive. And our gospel today teaches about that. And Jesus wants us to forgive the way his Father forgives, the way God forgives over and over and over again. And, Peter says 7 times we have to forgive somebody. Like, that's a huge number. And when you think about it, if somebody offends you and you have to forgive them 7 times, it seems like a lot. But Jesus says, no, 77 times, And it's like a large number. Just keep on forgiving. Don't worry about counting it. You just keep on forgiving. And that's the way God forgives us. And it's when we think about it, we want to be forgiven, and we get forgiven every day. We should go through a little act of contrition ourselves with God, and God forgives us. But we need to do the same for others. But it doesn't take much to think about times when it's very difficult to forgive. And there's, lots of them, whether it's a family member or something that happened at work or a partner or something that did something bad. Often you hear, and it's very sad, I'll never forgive them for that. I could never forgive them for that. And that's, it's like, oh my gosh, don't say that, because, then you're asking God to treat you the same way. Now, Mother Teresa said that if we really want to love, we must learn how to forgive. And then realizing how difficult that is. She also said, people are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. And so the message today for the readings is really forgive the way God does. Learn to love by learning how to forgive.